lovely friends, it's Margaret, and it is finally time for my top 10 books of 2019. Welcome to day 12 of 12 Days of Margaret. That's right, it's over. This is it, the last video. If you've missed the first 11 videos, I will have a playlist up there, but we're not going to talk about that anymore. We're going to talk about what I read in 2019. I read a lot of books in 2019. I read 126. So narrowing it down to the top 10 was very difficult. It was a little weird picking out my top 10 this year because I just felt, I don't know, I remember having strong feelings about a lot of these books, but when I went to make my list, I was just feeling very ambivalent. So we're going on what I remember of my last reading year. It has made me rethink my rating system a little bit because there were some 4 stars that I wanted to talk about and like would be on my top 10, and there were some 5 stars that I was like, well, I don't know, this wasn't really like, it was a 5-star book. It gave me the 5-star fuzzies, but at the same time, it's not something that I'm like, oh, but this is one of the best books I've read all year. So yeah, it was an experience narrowing it down to these top 10 books. However, these are 10 books that just blew me away this year. 10 books that I just, like, I still think about. 10 books that just, they gripped me, they got me, and they haven't let go. So these are the 10 books that I read for the first time this year that I absolutely need to talk to you guys about, like right now. I do want to say, as with most of my lists, these are in no particular order except for the last 2, well, kind of 3. You'll see when we get there. We're gonna start out with These Stars We Steal by Alexa Dunn. This is coming out in February of 2020, and I am so happy that I got an arc of this book. Oh my gosh, like, I enjoyed Brightly Burning. It was a good book, but I had my issues with it. There were some things that went down in Brightly Burning that I was just like, you know, I know this is part of the original Jane Eyre plot, but I don't like it any better in this plot. However, The Stars We Steal was so good. Granted, I was a little bit... The dude made me a little annoyed for points in this book, which is okay because he does things that make it better. So this is basically Persuasion meets The Bachelor in space. It is a prequel kind of to Brightly Burning, like it's the same universe, only it's 100 years earlier in the timeline. I just love how Alexandra Dunn does sci-fi. She does it so well, in my opinion. She does it really, like, it's accessible. She makes it as a part of the world, but she doesn't make it the main focus, and I feel like that's kind of how I like my sci-fi. I like my sci-fi to be more focused on the characters and on the plot than it is on how everything works. I love the fact that warp drives exist. I just don't need to know all of the inner workings of said warp drive. You know what I mean? This one had a lot more, like, thoughtful material than Brightly Burning did. I think that Brightly Burning was a true space opera. This one had a little bit more commentary. This one had you thinking about certain things when it comes to resource management, because that is something that they are running into, and how privilege works is something that is also kind of tackled in this. And I really appreciated how she tackled those subjects. I really loved Leo's journey as kind of this character that's trying to do what's best for her family, but also really feeling conflicted because what's best for her family is not necessarily what's best for her. I loved it. I loved the love interest. There's a scene towards the end that I knew was going to happen, or I was hoping was going to happen, and then it happened, and it made me really happy that it in fact happened, because I just love those kinds of scenes, because I would like for that to happen, except I never want to be in a position where that needs to happen. She also is really good about having a little bit of a mystery element in her sci-fi, a little bit of a, like, there's something that you know as the reader is not quite right, and you're watching the character piece together the fact that some of these people are shady. Another thing that I really liked about it is I felt like her writing has gotten, like, don't get me wrong, she was not a bad writer in Brightly Burning, but you can see the amount of growth that has happened between Brightly Burning and this book, because I felt like this just felt more connected to the characters and the plot. If you liked Brightly Burning, or you read Brightly Burning and you weren't entirely impressed, I definitely would still give this one a try, because I think it is better than her last book, even though her last book was very, very good. The next book that we need to talk about is Ace of Shades by Amanda Foody. This is purely on this list because it left me with the longest book hangover. Not really, honestly, because I know there have been longer book hangovers, but I don't typically, like, book hangovers don't really affect me usually. I'm usually like, okay, what's the next thing I'm going to read? And then this one had me, like, lying in bed at 10:30 at night just going, what am I doing with the rest of my life, because I couldn't get my hands on book 2. Granted, that was probably a good thing, considering I hear the ending of book 2 is worse than the ending of this one, more of a cliffhanger, and book 3 doesn't come out until like September. So Yeah, I'm glad I didn't jump out right away and go grab the book and start reading it. I had a little minute to distance myself. However, okay, so let's talk about this. I loved In and Levi as characters. They had such, they were so flawed, but also so pure, and I loved them. I loved the struggles that they're, not necessarily love the struggles, but I loved watching them try and tackle the things that happened to them in this novel. I love them trying to figure things out, and I love how they work together as a team when they are willing to work together as a team, because sometimes they not. And you just, you wanted to whack them over the head and be like, listen, if you would just talk with each other, things would be much better for you. You know that, right? Like you need to communicate. They're so stubborn, and I love it. Also, angsty, slow burn. There was a lot of time spent thinking about kissing, but there was no actual kissing, which just, there'd been kissing, this would have been a 5-star book. But there was no kissing, so it was not a 5-star book, it was a 4-star book. But it still just like took me over, and I loved it. Oh, I enjoyed this so much. I really liked the world that Amanda Foody came up with. I felt like it was just enough of like historical fiction, but it had a little bit of like more modern stuff in it, and I really enjoy that kind of steampunk vibe. This is not pure steampunk, but it still has kind of that like, here's a mix of the old and the new in there. She didn't let the kind of historical setting hinder the story that she was trying to tell. I really appreciated the magic system and how they use the magic, and the way that they're able to kind of make up for things that we have in technology with magic. You're gonna see that again on this list, but I really just like when people use magic to make up for technology, because I do. I really do. I really like reimagining like how, if we're in a world with magic, what would we use it for? And I like those questions. I liked the fact that like the magic has certain bloodlines, and I like some of the intricacies that you get into that, especially with Levi's character. That was a really interesting conflict to me. It was such a good book, and you should read it. The next book that I want to talk to you guys about is The Proposal by Jasmine Guillory. Yes, it's an adult romance on a list by Margaret. Did you know I read things that are not YA? Me too. So this is a companion novel to Jasmine Guillory's first book, The Wedding Date. You do not have to like read them in order, but I would suggest it because the characters from the first book just keep popping up, and it makes me so happy. But I absolutely adored this book. I was reading this, I was about halfway through, and we went to the bookstore, and I was like, you know what, I'm enjoying this so much that I'm just gonna go buy it. So I went and I bought it. This was the first Jasmine Guillory book that I owned. This was so much fun to read. I loved watching Nick and Carlos go through this kind of relationship. I loved the really just absolutely bonkers way they meet, and the way that happens, and how it all falls out. Just Carlos is such a good guy. I love Carlos. Like Carlos is goals, guys. He is goals, and there needs to be more of him in this world, because he is so fantastic about just like not requiring things from Nick. Like, he doesn't go into this relationship or go into the beginning of the relationship expecting her to owe him things when he does things for her. And I really appreciated that, because we all know that, you know, there's some guys out there that will do things, but they expect something in return. This was fun and a good read, and I love the diversity and the care that Jasmine Guillory takes with her characters. She does such a good job just exploring characters and their mindset, and even when you don't agree with them, you kind of understand where they're coming from, and you can be like, well, I think you're stupid, but I understand what's going on here in your head, and so I'm not going to judge you too harshly, but I am going to give you maybe a little bit of a side eye. So next we need to talk about Lazaretto by Diane McKinney Whetstone. This was the most unexpected favorite on this list. Like, I just needed a book to fulfill a prompt for Blackathon, and I needed it to be an audiobook, so I found this on Overdrive. I was like, this looks interesting. I like historical fiction. I'm trying to read more Black authors, especially in February, and so I picked it up, and I started listening to it, and just the ride this book takes you on. It takes place starting right after Abraham Lincoln is assassinated, and it follows several Black families in the aftermath of that. It also follows the story of 2 boys that are in an orphanage around that time, and oh my goodness, just the way that the storylines are woven together in this book. I can't really tell you all that much about it. Just know that it is good, and it made me feel things. I felt lots of things at the end of this book, and they were all good things. There are a lot of bad things that happen in this book, but like at the end, they were all good things. I really think that this book does a great job of accurately representing the historical attitudes towards Black people and to women in this book, while also giving you something to think about, like how like it points out, hey, this is not how things should be, but this is how they are. And I love the awareness that the characters have of that. I love the fact that, like, even though they are having to accept that this is their life and what they're going through, they still are like, but this is not how it should be. I think that was really well done. I also just, the fact that it was multi-generational within these several families, and the fact that you get all of these different stories for the other characters in this book, it was so good. And like, I need more layered, multi-generational, like, slice of life moments like this. I mean, it wasn't entirely slice of life, but you really got deep into some of these characters' backstories and what was happening to them, and certain things that you're sitting there going, okay, well, this is interesting, I'm not sure how it relates to the plot, but it's interesting. They all come together in such a wonderful way in this book, and I just highly recommend it. So next, we need to talk about a book. I don't have the entire series, so I'm just going to hold up the first book, but we need to talk about a series that has been on my physical TBR since 2010, and 2011, I think. And it's just a shame that it took me as long as it took me to get to this, because I absolutely adored that. And that is the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. This is the first book, Cinder. It's a series of sci-fi, fairy tale retellings. There's a lot of sci-fi on this list. There's a reason I rediscovered my love for sci-fi this year. Like, I love it. I do, and I love how well Marissa Meyer retold these stories. I will warn you, the ending of Cinder is a bit abrupt, but there was a reason for that, because Cinder's story is not over. Some of the things that blew me away about this series was how she used the sci-fi elements to create plot lines that carry through and have ramifications later on, and not just like ramifications like just because it's plot stuff, but like stuff that actually directly is linked to the fairy tales that she is retelling. The way she just, the mind, I just like cannot comprehend writing something that is as well plotted and well utilized as the things that she has in this series. I know, I'm ranting, I'm sorry, I'm not sorry, because this is a very good series and I'm having feelings now. I really loved how well she managed to cover a multitude of characters. Like, every single book, you're introduced to a new set of characters. Well, actually, technically, we meet a couple of them, and like, so each fairy tale, the main character is that particular fairy tale, but she does such a good job of weaving everyone else's stories into this plot, this amazing amalgamation of fairy tale goodness. She does such a good job of just like balancing all of the perspectives. That's what we're looking for. She does. I've never one moment, well, there were a couple of moments, but that's because it was Lavana, and you know how I feel about villains. They're not my favorite. I just could do without villains. Except that they make stories more interesting, and like, so that's their only purpose, in my opinion. Anyways, so what I was saying is there was never one moment where I was like, this perspective doesn't necessarily need to be here. And that is something that I have an issue with in a lot of multi-perspective books. But she did such a good job balancing everyone, and I appreciated it, and I loved it, and I really need to read, like, Stars Above, because I don't know why I haven't gotten to it yet. Alright, lighting change, because the apocalypse decided to roll in the Florida sky. So we're just gonna make do with the lighting that we have. The next book we need to talk about is also a sci-fi, and that is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. Oh my goodness, guys. This was such a ride. This is about Spensa, and she's trying to get into, I don't remember what it's called, but it's basically the space force on her planet. They've been living underground basically because there's an alien force that is keeping them on this planet where they crash landed, and then there's some stuff going on with her dad because her dad was labeled a coward, and she doesn't like that, and because he was labeled a coward, it makes things more difficult for her because people have been looking down on her whole life, and there's a lot of rage and anger and just issues there, and I had so much fun reading this book. It is a 4-book series apparently, which I'm not prepared for, but also it's Brandon Sanderson, so I don't know what else I expected. I really don't. It was so well done. I thought he did a great job of making this sci-fi world, making the details accessible and interesting. I listened to this as an audiobook, and it was one of the best audiobooks, one of my favorite audiobooks from 2019. I loved the characters that he came up with, especially Spensa. There was not a single moment reading this book where I was like, oh yeah, this is a female character who is definitely being written by a dude. He gave Spensa the room to be a multifaceted character. He gave her the room to be a character that was, yes, very belligerent and very just, she had a chip on her shoulder, and he gave her the room to do that, but also be kind and caring to the people that she cared about. I really appreciated how we didn't just have like this one, like, I'm going to punch things and make things better that way kind of character, that she actually used her brain, that she actually used her heart. Also, there's a character who I won't talk about. I mean, it's not going to make any, I'm not going to say who it is though, who was just a delight as a character. Their dry sense of humor just perfectly meshes with my own. Hold on. The sun came back out, so it was time to turn the lights out again. Alright, anyways, so I just had so much fun. There was a slight, like, maybe hint of a romance that if it goes where I want it to go, I will be very into, because it's going to be some slow burn, and I don't know why I love slow burn as much as I do, because it's very frustrating for me as a human being, but also at the same time, it just, like, fulfills a part of my soul. Don't ask me how this works, but I love it. Some of my favorite romances, most of my favorite romances are slow burn. Why am I the way I am? Anyways, there was not enough kissing in this book, but like, I'm not gonna hold that against it, because he did the rest of it so well. And I just, like, oh, one of the things I really did appreciate about this book is how layered it is. Like, because you start out thinking it is one issue, and as you kind of discover more parts of this issue that Spencer is exploring and what she's trying to do, as you sit there and she digs into this, the mystery of her father's death, she starts discovering other things, lots of other things, and it just kind of escalates in this really great just progression to destruction. Not actually destruction, but like just disaster. And where we leave off in this book, not fun. I have a feeling Starside's probably going to be worse, but I loved it, and I need this book in my life. Alright, I know this is starting to feel a little bit like I'm just doing a sci-fi fantasy list, but we do have to talk about The Sun Is Also a Star by NEWME. Oh my goodness, this book. This is about Natasha and Daniel, and they're both kind of struggling with different issues in their family. I really appreciated the fact that we have couple different facets of the immigrant experience in this book that are covered, because we have Natasha, who is an undocumented immigrant, and they are getting kicked out of the United States. They're being deported back to Jamaica, where she came from. And then you have Daniel, whose parents came over from Korea, and now he is having to deal with the fact that they have certain hopes and dreams for him that don't necessarily match up with the hopes and dreams that he has for himself. I really thought that NEWME handled that in a way that makes it very accessible. It makes it very human and relatable. It really makes it pull at your heartstrings. At the same time, this is a 24-hour romance that is paced so beautifully that you actually believe that these two characters could have met and fallen in love and made this deep connection over the course of this day. The ending is a bit abrupt, it's a bit unexpected, but I still loved it because, like, my friends, you know what's happening at the end of this novel. You just do. You do. After the end is there, like, you know what's gonna happen. I love the way NEWME explores characters. I remember really enjoying everything as well, and I think that this digs even deeper into her main characters. This really explores them and lets you get to know them as a person. I also really appreciated the fact that she included other points of view. That's part of what made this story as special as it did. There are other points of view included that have an impact on Natasha and Daniel's day, or Natasha and Daniel end up having an impact on them, and just watching how all of that comes together towards the end of the book, just, I don't know how you could have written the ending of this book any other way and still had it be as powerful, because, like, just, guys, it was so good. It was amazing, and I just have no words any longer for this book because I loved it. And now it is time to talk about a new favorite. Like, I knew she was getting there on the favorites, but this is the book that solidified her as a favorite author, and that is There's Something About Sweetie by Sandhya Menon. I love this book. Like, I thought I loved Dimple and Rishi, but Sweetie and Ashish just, they took the bar and they raised it even higher, because this was such a fantastic kind of, not fake dating, but like they enter into this kind of pact because Sweetie wants to prove to her mother, or to herself actually, Sweetie more wants to prove to herself than to her mom, but she wants to prove that someone like Ashish would actually in fact be interested in dating her. Ashish is trying to kind of get over his old girlfriend and the fact that he's kind of lost his mojo, and so his mother sets him up with Sweetie, and then there's all of this like family drama that happens, and so they end up dating behind their parents' backs. I love how it is focusing on Sweetie's face instead of my face, as it should. So this was so great. I loved how much communication was going on between Sweetie and Ashish, because there is so much room in this plot for miscommunication. And yet, they did things the right way. And I love how it shows that even when you sometimes even when you do things the right way, even when you are trying to do the right thing, you still mess up. And sometimes it's still like you still have to deal with the fact that feelings are not always predictable or reasonable or logical. I love the fact that Sandhya Manal never shies away from including Indian culture in her books. She just puts it in there. I also love the fact that like there's so much Hindi in this, and she does such a good job of like putting the Hindi in there but still making it obvious what the person is saying without providing a direct translation, because she doesn't need to. Like, how often do you see books that have French or Spanish or Latin in them and then a direct translation is not necessarily provided? And she doesn't bother with that. She just has responses that give you an idea of what is going on and what is being said. I love how diverse her books are. Like, it's not just that you have Indian culture, and she doesn't just stick with her 2 Indian main leads and call that the day for her diversity quota. She puts in so much more, and I just really appreciate that. Like, she goes and she shows that diversity is not one thing. It is all of the things mixed together, and I love that. I appreciated that, and I cannot wait for the next book in this series. Now we're to my top 2 picks for the year, and this series it grabbed me and wouldn't let me go. So anyways, we need to talk about Bloodwitch by Susan Dennard. I was not expecting to love this series as much as I did, and yet here we are. I will not lie, I spent most of this book frustrated, and then chapter 59 happened, and chapter 59 is one of my favorite tropes to ever exist. I can't tell you what it is because it will spoil things for when certain things happen, but let's just say I was waiting 2 whole books for it to happen, and it happened, and so now I am happy, except I'm not, because it didn't end in a good place, and we have 2 years until the next book. So 2022, I'm expecting book 4 to be the number 1 book on my 2021. My 2021 list, because I know it's not coming out this year, but then it might be coming out next year. I don't know, guys. I know I need the next book, and this is the 3rd book in the Witchlands series, and the Witchlands, basically, it's kind of elemental magic, but it has more layers to it than that, because like we have blood witches, and we have truth witches, and like void witches, and ether witches, and it just, I love Susan Dennard's magic system. I just love how she uses it in her world. This is another one where she uses it in the place of technology. So you have such interesting ways that she is able to do things that we might see in a modern setting, but she uses magic to do those things rather than using electricity and like cell phones and things like that. I really appreciate that. I love her characters. Oh my goodness, I love her characters. Safi and Merrick are one of my new favorite couples, and I need more of them, and I'm very sad that we don't get as much of them as I would like. Like, I literally could do an entire series just the 2 of them being idiots together. However, there's another couple that we get in this book that I also love them, and my most disappointing thing was that Safi and Merrick were not there to give them crap about how ridiculous they were being. I don't think they figured out that they like each other yet. I don't think they figured. I think they might be having an inkling, but I don't think they have in fact officially realized how they feel about each other. It's fine. Again, slow burns. This, so slow burn. So slow burn. Takes 3 books for these 2 to minorly get their crap together. Also, my favorite couple ends up separated for 2 whole books, and I'm just like, why are we doing this to me? And yet, here it is, number 2 on my favorites of 2019, because the way Susan Dennard can write a story just grabs you. She does such a good job with creating these cultures and these other countries. Like, you actually feel like there is a whole entire world behind these novels, because we're not just sticking in one country. You feel like there's all of this like layer to the world and the magic system, and there's so much lore that is backing it up that she doesn't necessarily like sit and outright tell you, but you can feel the history and the backstory in this novel because of the things that end up being said. My friends, this is going to be a new favorite series. If she does her cards right, this will be a new favorite series. And finally, we need to talk about my favorite book of the year. And I know some of you probably thought this was going to be The Wicked King. I also very much thought it was going to be The Wicked King. I didn't think anything was going to be able to top The Wicked King in my book. And then Holly Black decided to release Queen of Nothing this year as well. I don't know why that happened, and I do not care. because this book was everything I wanted it to be and then some. I just, like, granted, there wasn't enough of my two faves being my two faves together in this book, but I could say that for the last two books, so there's that. Like, honestly, I feel like this one probably, and people are probably going to argue with me, but I feel like this one has the most Jude and Cardan of the three books, because if you actually go back and reread them, they don't have a lot of interaction, especially in The Cruel Prince. Like, there's, like, just, like, a little bit in The Cruel Prince, and then there's a little more in The Wicked King, and then we get Queen of Nothing, and one of my favorite things about this entire book is how well Holly Black does Cardan's arc. She also does Jude's arc very well, but the fact, the awareness that Cardan shows for what he has done and how he has behaved, and the efforts that are made to make that right and to give space to the people that he has harmed, I really appreciated that. I love the fact that Cardan is such a self-aware character. And he is also a sweet boy who was turned cruel by a cruel world. Like, oh, the prologue of this confirmed all of my good thoughts towards Cardan Greenbrier. I was right. I was right about a lot of things, and I am very happy I was right. Let's talk about Jude. Jude is so different in this book, and I feel like Jude's life would have been so, like, the last three books would have been so different if she had been sent to the mortal realm before the events of The Cruel Prince. Like, you can tell that she has had time to sit and think. She's had time to finally process what's happened to her. You kind of get the sense that for the first time in her life, she's sat down and been able to not be terrified for a hot minute. And I feel like so much of Jude's life has just been trying to survive the next thing that she has not had time to process. And she definitely, like, we go into this book, it's several months later from The Wicked King, and you can tell she's had time to process. I feel like that, for me, that is why there's a slight difference between who Jude is in The Wicked King, because she is super intense, and who she is in this. Now, she's still dumb and intense. She reeks of dumbass Slytherin energy, and I did not know that was a thing until I read this book, but it is a thing, and Jude and Cardan are like the king and queen of it. This was such a great conclusion. I do know people don't like the fact that it is as short as it is, but I feel like Holly Black doesn't have to do as much world building in this one. I feel like most of the world building has been done in the bulk of The Cruel Prince and in The Wicked King, and this was just about wrapping Jude's plot lines up, wrapping all the plot lines that were introduced in the first two books up, and making sure that everything had a satisfying conclusion. I could spend the rest of my life reading books about these two, though. So, like, I love it. I just think this is such a good book, and it brought me so much joy, and it is definitely my favorite new book of the year. I have a lot that I have talked about this book and this series, so I will have it linked down in the description box. I have reviews for some of these, I have reviews coming up for some of these. All of that will be linked down in the description box once it comes out, so that you can, like, see more in-depth thoughts where I actually talk about things and don't just, like, rant about how much I love them. I'm gonna be honest, there's a little bit of ranting in my reviews as well. Okay, so those are my top 20 reads of 2019. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Lets me know that I need to make more content like this. If you are new here and you like videos about books and writing, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That is it for now, my friends. Happy reading, and I will see you later when we will talk about more wordy, nerdy things. Bye!